Hello and welcome back. It's so good to see everybody today. I have a very, very special guest. I'm so pleased and honored to be joined with me today, Nikki Lawley, who is with Nikki and the Plant. One of the most important aspects of the work we do is the patient advocacy work. The work of patient advocates is really getting the story out there and talking about the stigma. And Nikki has a really interesting background because she herself was a healthcare provider. She came to us as a nurse. And she had a really, really interesting story, and she and I connected immediately. We'll have a chance to talk to her about a lot of things today, but I'm so excited to have Nikki join us. And she's also the newest member of CannabisBPO's Board of Advisors. So Nikki, welcome to our program, and I'm so thrilled to have you.
Thanks so much, Dan. I'm super excited to be part of CannabisBPO.
And you're a hot commodity. You were just on Montel's podcast, and since then, everybody wants to get Nikki on their show. So I feel honored that Montel, Dan Berman, we'll see if we can get some really meaningful information out to patients and patient advocates out there, because that's really what we're here for today. Nikki, take just a few minutes and tell us about your story, because I mean, nobody can really tell us your story like you. And I just want our viewers to be able to hear it from your mouth.
Sure. So back in 2016, it was just like any other day, a normal nursing day, and a kid didn't want a vaccine. I was working as a pediatric nurse in a clinic, and it's a pretty normal thing. And this kid just absolutely said no way. And so I was called in to assist and basically got a traumatic brain injury. The child headbutted me, and I was thrown into a wall and back into his head. I went through 50 different doctors, about 60 different medications, different treatments, different therapies. And I was literally planning my death, Dan. Back in January of 17, I was contemplating suicide at the Cosmopolitan Hotel, ready to Peter Pan off the balcony. And it totally was the worst time of my life. I've never been in such a dark place. And when I was looking down over the balcony, a mobile billboard came by that said, "Get your medical cannabis card in Nevada today." Now, I had smoked marijuana previously and never thought twice of it being as medicine. And immediately when that billboard came by, I saw heard Nancy Reagan saying, "Your brain on drugs," along with that fried egg in the frying pan of what your brain looks like on drugs. And so having a brain injury, I really didn't think that was going to be a cool idea to try weed. But then it came by a second time, and my husband came back to the room and said, "Well, let's go do it. You've laughed on cannabis before and had fun on cannabis. Why don't we try that again?" I mean, my husband was in a place where, there was so much darkness going on with me that to even get me out of the hotel room after 3 days was impossible. So we end up going to the dispensary and getting my card. And I got to tell you, Dan, I tried so many different products and nothing was really working. I was trying the gummies, the tinctures, the pads, the, little chewy things that aren't supposed to go through first pass digestion, but nothing was working. I smoked a joint, and I was able to get out of that hotel room for the very first time in 3 days. And cannabis is not a cure for me. It's just a tool in my toolbox, if you will, because traumatic brain injury is an invisible illness. Traumatic brain injury, you don't see something that's broken. It's not like I have a huge scar down my head that says she's been hurt, so give her a break. Every day is a challenge with TBI, and people don't know what they don't know. And I was one of those people that didn't know about cannabis as medicine.
Well, I love your tagline that cannabis is your medicine, and it changed your life, and you discovered how to function with it. And the story you tell is amazing as a patient, but I really want to hear your story from the perspective of a provider, because we all come at this plant and this medicine from a different perspective. You were a pediatric nurse. If someone had come to you with a traumatic brain injury when you were a pediatric nurse and they suggested cannabis, what would you have said? And how have your views changed? And how, honestly, do we as a society shift people's thinking? That's why we're here today.
If you would have told me your kid was on cannabis for any reason, whether it was a TBI, a seizure disorder, autism, whatever, I would have called Child Protective Services on you as a parent, pretty much. I completely didn't understand it as medicine. And I am pretty sure all the physicians I worked with at that clinic completely didn't look at it as medicine. My opinion has 180-degree spun around because I've seen children treated with cannabis. I've seen seizures stop in their tracks. What's very frustrating is the stigma. Just even talking about cannabis, people look at you like you're kind of crazy. And everywhere I go, I feel is a learning opportunity and, learn and teach others. And so that's what I'm out there doing all the time, including to other physicians, because even physicians treating me as a patient and you tell them you're using cannabis, they immediately are like, you're just getting high, or you're just trying to, beat the system. And, why is euphoria or positivity a bad side effect? Why is smiling instead of crying a bad thing?
We're laughing.
It blows my mind that, oh, well, you're just high. No, I'm normal. This is how I used to be before the plant.
Yeah, the stigma attached to doc within the physician community is one of the more frustrating things for me. Coming from the pharmaceutical and healthcare arena, that's really my mission. There are 1.5 million prescribing professionals out there, physicians, NPs, nurse practitioners, and less than 6% of them have any clue about the endocannabinoid system or endocannabinoid science. And so one of the things I like to do is to tell the perspective of a patient. And your story is unique because none of the edibles worked for you. However, smoking does, and it help us understand why, make the audience a medical professional, but it works. Tell us about that.
So what I have learned through research and talking to other experts, I don't have a gallbladder, and THC, CBD, the main molecules of the cannabis plant are fat soluble. So you need fat and you need to be able to process fat in order to feel the effects. For me, not having a gallbladder, and I also had weight loss surgery, it does not affect me at all. Like I literally could eat 1,000 milligrams of anything and I might feel nauseous from the too much sugar or something like that. I ate 2 Boulder bars once and they're 500 milligrams each.
Nothing.
So,
wow.
And I felt nothing. And this was before I knew anything about cannabis. We'd gone to Colorado for the first time, and I tried the legal weed there, and but I felt nothing then either, and I was like, oh, you got to eat this before you go home because I can't take it with me on the plane. So I downed 2 Boulder bars. But so I'm a little different than that. But honestly, smoking cannabis gives me immediate onset and immediate relief. It does go out of my system quickly. So I microdose or smoke all day long, just a small amount. And that really helps keep my symptoms at bay. The 3 things I mainly treat are chronic pain, anxiety and depression, as well as brain fog and cognitive function. Cognitive function for me is everything. That's probably what TBI stole the most from me, was being able to communicate and being able.
Irony of people saying pot numbs your brain, and you're saying the opposite, it sharpens your brain.
It truly does. I'm speaking next month at NECAN, and one of my biggest concerns is where I'm going to medicate before I go on stage, because if I don't have a place that's safe where I feel like I'm not in an alley and going to get a cop have me arrested.
Arrested before your speaking engagement.
It sounds crazy, but people don't know what they don't know. And I'm truly medicating for the benefit. I don't get high, Dan. I really don't. I get medicated. I get well.
That was my first experience. My very first cannabis conference in Las Vegas. I was wearing my CannabisBPO shirt, and I had a thing for whichever conference was around my neck. And some old man gets in the elevator and says, "Huh, cannabis." He said, "Are you high right now?" And I looked at him, I said, "I'm medicated right now." He says, I got to get used to all these new words he said.
Right.
It's coming. I said, you better get used to it, because words do matter. And that's why I love to hear your story, that it is your medicine. I love to hear your story because physicians need to hear your story, that it makes you functional and without being able to smoke it specifically, because there's judgment around combustion in cannabis. There's judgment around smoking in cannabis. But for you, I think it's important for people to take the judgment out. And I think it's so important for physicians and the physician community to take the judgment out and listen to patients, because isn't that what patient advocacy is all about?
Kind of, yeah. One of the physicians I actually was treated by, a local doctor here in Buffalo, New York, literally put in my medical record that I was drug seeking and that I was seeking THC cannabis to smoke, and therefore it wasn't medicine, and literally did not want to approve me for the medical cannabis program in New York State. And this was about 2 years into my journey. And knowing what I knew, it was a little frightening that the recognized expert in cannabis would say these things and actually put that in my medical record. I'm anything but drug seeking. I'm drug seeking to get off of medicine, not looking for more.
Right. Wow. I mean, we can get into the whole other side of that. Drug seeking is specific to opioids is usually what they're referring to. And I've talked about this a lot, but cannabis should be the cornerstone of the opioid epidemic. And I think doctors are starting to recognize that now, that this is much safer. And we see a huge shift in public health in places like Colorado. And you see opioid death reductions where cannabis is legal. So I think it's starting to shift physicians' thinking, but we still have a long way to go. If you were to send a message to physicians about your story, help me tell the story to doctors so they won't have that reaction to put in the chart, drug-seeking patient. Nothing can be more frustrating and more scary to a patient than a story like that.
Well, and that goes on your permanent medical record, and that follows you everywhere you go, whether it's a hospital or anything. And so then immediately you're regarded as like, because cannabis is Schedule 1, everyone looks at it like it's heroin if you're not familiar with the plant, because it's in the same classification of drugs, which is ridiculous. And so I guess what I would say to these physicians is, at the end of the day, the patients really are the experts. We are the ones using the medicine, and you need to accept our feedback. Just because you read something in a journal doesn't mean that's gospel. Actually listen to your patients, actually listen to how they medicate and help them with that. And if you don't know enough about smoking or combusting, then let's dial it up and learn about it, because I wish I could find another means of medicating. I mean, it's incredibly inconvenient. If a gummy would work, or even vape pens. Vape pens exit my system so fast. I'm a very fast metabolizer of the THC. So I've done lots of genetic testing and things like that to kind of learn about my body and try and understand why I can't take a pill and make this work, because I really would love to.
That's also the way medical professionals think, and that's the way doctors think. I like to say, in the traditional medical profession, the doctor writes a prescription. He gives you the prescription, or emails it, however it goes now electronically. And you're expected to pick up that prescription and take it exactly as prescribed, or you're considered by the doctor and the practice non-compliant. That is the term that's used. You're non-compliant. Cannabis is totally different. It really is. You come in and you're on your own. There's the salad bar. It's more like a buffet. There's a salad bar. There's the soup. There's the sushi. You might want to start with the soup, but good luck. Come back and tell me how it goes. And so patients really are on their own to learn on their own. And from that perspective, the medical community is leaving themselves behind and leaving themselves less relevant, because patients can't learn from the doctor. So they're going to go learn it on their own. Is that the safest way to do it? No, we know it's not the safest way to do it. But people are desperate.
I'm a little different because I do have a nursing background and I understand drug metabolism and bioavailability and things like that. But if I didn't have my healthcare background, I would be lost. I mean, just explaining it to other physicians that are absolutely clueless, they literally can't relate. They've not been taught plant medicine is an option.
Don't understand. They just don't understand it. But interestingly enough, what's happening now is so many patients are coming to their doctor and asking the doctors about it. And the doctors are clueless because they just have not gotten education. I think the critical mass is happening where doctors are starting to raise their hands and say, I got to get educated about this because my patients are coming to me. I have no answers. And that's why your story is so important, because we want to let doctors and physicians in the medical community know you can get CMEs for these to learn about plant-based medicine and learn about terpenes and learn about cannabis, cannabinoid-based sciences. And there are clinical studies, there are peer-reviewed studies. It's just not traditional like we normally see. It's not sponsored by pharma. It's a very, very different model that we have to educate the community. That's kind of my calling, is to get out on the mountainside and yell, there's education out there, go learn.
Right. And there's a lot of education companies coming on board, but a physician learns differently than a consumer. So it's important that we recognize the consumer is who's using the product, and we really need to dumb it down so that the consumers can understand what a terpene is and why that's important. One of the biggest aha moments I had with the plant was learning terpenes are just essential oils. That was a huge.
They're everywhere in nature.
They're everywhere. And, they put terpenes in orange juice. Okay. We need to realize it's not poison. It's actually incredibly beneficial. And for me, I target specific terpenes. I was able to learn about the plant best because I learned about it in Canada. Canada has an incredible medical program, and they also have tools that you can use. One of the tools I used there was Strain Print. It's an app that literally tracks your usage, but they have all the back end data. They have all the COAs, or certificates of analysis, the recipe, if you will, that's in the plant. And that, as a patient, I can actually go and select Blue Dream from Canna Farms. But if I had Blue Dream from Haven Street, it has a whole different profile. It has a whole different effect. So a strain name really, truly means nothing. One of the frustrating things I literally commented on yesterday in social media was, there's a strain called Titty Bubbles. And I'm like, can't we do better? I literally commented and said, I, as a 51-year-old female, do not want to walk into a dispensary and ask for titty bubbles
or elastic thunderfuck or cheetah piss or
exactly. I shouldn't. It was embarrassing. It's almost embarrassing. And I'm anything but a prude, Dan. But truly, when I'm talking to my, 75-year-old friend down the street that I'm saying this could help with her arthritis, I don't want to tell her to have to go get titty bubbles. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Nomenclature will change. Nomenclature will catch up. I agree with you. We don't want to make grandma feel like a stoner. And we all know that the fastest growing segment of the cannabis consuming population is your segment.
Yes.
And so the market will adjust. The market will agree with you eventually, and agree with me. I've been preaching about this for years, that we have to find the lanes within cannabis that are in regular, like the word edible. I hate the word edible. The word edible implies it's okay. Why would I want to promote something that's just okay? It's edible. Well, I want to promote something that tastes good. If I'm going to eat cannabis chocolates, I want it to taste good. Edible is the worst word in the world. I think the word edible will finally disappear from the cannabis nomenclature eventually, because it'll find its regular lane in consumer packaged goods in America. They don't call Coca-Cola edible.
Good point. Very good point.
Hopefully, as the market grows and the market matures. But in the last part of this, I'd like to talk about, because you live in Buffalo, and I think this is the most interesting part, one of the more interesting parts of your story. Everything about your story is interesting, but the fact that you're in Buffalo and right across the border from Canada, and we're literally a cannabis refugee. I mean, it doesn't really, you think about that, and you keep a locker in Canada with products. That's almost like a cigar locker at a cigar bar. I want to come visit your locker sometime and hang with you, but talk to us a little bit about being a cannabis refugee before it became legal in New York. I'd love to hear that part of your story.
Sure. So when I came back from Vegas, New York State did not have chronic pain as one of the conditions that were approved. So I got a tiny bit of hope, and then I literally was shot down to the bottom again because now I had no hope. I mean, I was just back on the same drugs and nothing was helping, and that weed seemed to help. And so I had friends in Canada that literally said, well, come on up here. We've got weed, come up here and, do whatever it takes. And, I'll get my medical card and we'll try and help you out. So that's what I did. And it was really crazy, Dan, because my husband called and I was actually playing Scrabble. Okay. I mean, you have to understand, I went from going in the corner, crying, sobbing, unable to completely function at all, to playing Scrabble and doing basic math. These were things that I had not done since my injury. And my husband calls and he's like, what's wrong with you? I said, what do you mean, what's wrong with me?
Normal. That's what's wrong with me.
You sound normal. And I said, maybe it's this pot, and he kind of gave me that aha moment. And so then literally I would hold on, because I couldn't bring my medicine home from Canada to the US, that's federal drug trafficking, not something I wanted to get into. So I ended up getting a storage locker, and I would pick up my medicine on the way to Kingston, Ontario, where I would go medicate for 2, 3, 4, 5 days at a time. And then I would drop the cannabis back off at my storage locker in Niagara Falls, Ontario, and then I would come back home. The pandemic was devastating for me because that was my link to life. That was like I lived to go to Canada because that's where I felt better. That's where I was able to function normally. And I learned so much about the plant. There's so many organizations there, and they're so much further ahead than America. They're so much further ahead. And I'm not saying they do everything right, but patient education and patient focus was really part of the education of what I learned.
Just basic access is the biggest issue. When you find what works for you, and if you can't find it again, that can be devastating.
It is facts. And, relying on untested medicine with just a strain name is really not how we should be promoting patient use. Having that back end COA in New York State, we have no access to COAs. That is regarded as proprietary information. I'm part of Americans for Safe Access for New York State Advisory Board. And one of the things I'm going to be screaming at the top of my lungs is we need access to COAs, because without that recipe, how do we know what's working?
Right. Well, Nikki, I could talk to you all day. This is so much fun. I mean, I just love your enthusiasm, your passion for the patient and for the plant. I'm so excited to have you on our board of advisors because you bring the most important voice to this whole conversation. That is the voice of the patient. And I'm honored to have you on, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dan.